Hey guys, tonight we slide back, way back to a world where you're padding barefoot through warm grass, the air humming with insects, and the only light is the orange glow of a fire you didn't start. You're following people who don't have farms yet, don't have pottery yet, and definitely don't have hangover cures yet. But they're about to make a discovery that will change human history. What happens when fruit goes bad, in a surprisingly good way? And yes, you probably won't survive this timeline with your dignity intact, because these early experiments get messy fast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far this little sleepy corner of the internet reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge behind a small band of foragers as they wander through the edge of a forest, stopping now and then to sniff berries, poke mushrooms, and argue, in sounds more than words, about which tree belongs to who. They rely on instinct, memory, and whatever didn't poison them the week before. Tonight, though, they're drawn toward a cluster of overripe fruit scattered at the base of a fig tree. Some figs are split open, soft and glistening under the moon, buzzing with curious insects. You crouch beside the heap, and that faint, fizzy, slightly sour smell tickles your nose, a smell you know instantly, even though they don't yet. Fermentation. A few adventurous members of the group scoop up the mush, sniff it, and shrug with a confidence you wish you had. One takes a bite. His eyebrows rise. Another tries. She giggles, which isn't a reaction this group produces very often. You watch their shoulders loosen, their movements get sillier, and someone starts dancing with the intensity of a person who has never seen dancing before, but is absolutely sure they invented it. You can practically hear ancient historians groaning because, yes, the earliest form of drunkenness might have been this simple. Fruit, time, and someone whose curiosity outweighed their survival instincts. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your ear like a bedtime breeze. Scientists genuinely believe early humans often encountered naturally fermented fruits, especially figs, dates, and berries, and may have consumed them without fully understanding what caused the funny feeling. One study even suggests elephants and monkeys still seek out fermented fruit deliberately, which makes you feel a little less embarrassed about humanity's first accidental party. But then there's the quirky tidbit that makes you smile. Some researchers think ancient humans occasionally followed animals to find boozy trees. Imagine you tracking a bunch of noisy baboons and thinking, wow, they seem to be having a great time, before stumbling onto a fermenting treasure pile, like you're on a prehistoric pub crawl. Historians still argue whether people actually recognized fermentation as a process this early, or if it was more like, this fruit tastes weird. Let's eat more and see what happens. But as you watch this small group, you can tell recognition wasn't the priority. The priority was, this makes the world feel warm and floaty, maybe we should keep doing it. You sit on the ground beside them, feeling the glow of their fire, hearing soft chatter, more giggles than usual, as the fig mush continues to bubble gently in a hollow where rainwater once pooled. You notice a small detail. Their hands keep returning to the squishy pile, curious, fascinated, maybe even reverent. Not yet a ritual, not yet a craft, but the seed of something that will shape civilizations, accidental intoxication, evolving into intentional brewing. Someone drops a piece of fruit into a cracked tree trunk filled with rainwater, and for a moment you glimpse the future. Jars, pots, breweries, the clinking of glasses thousands of years away. Tonight, though, all you have is moonlight, sticky hands, and a very ancient version of someone insisting they're not drunk, just happy. You rest your head back and let the night wash over you. This is how it began, not in a palace, not in a tavern, but in a quiet stretch of wild earth where curious humans discovered that nature sometimes gives you a little nudge toward forgetting your worries. The fire pops softly. A sleepy wind brushes your cheek. Someone laughs again loudly, and the sound echoes into the darkness like the first toast in human history. You're still lingering near that same flickering fire, its glow now softer as dawn nudges at the horizon. The air is cooler, the laughter quieter, and the group from last night is sprawled around like confused housecats trying to remember why the sky is spinning. You stretch your legs and follow a pair of early gatherers, wandering toward a hive tucked into the crook of an ancient tree. They're after honey sweet, precious honey that normally tastes like sunshine trapped in syrup. But today, something is different. The hive looks bloated, heavy, and dripping, with a strange froth that glints gold in the morning light. You step closer. The air smells thick, sweet, and a little sharp, like someone mixed flowers with something sparkier, more alive. The gatherers poke around, crack open part of the structure, and watch as a slosh of liquid honey comes pouring out. Except it's not quite honey anymore. It's bubbling, just a little, sending up faint threads of vapor. You know instantly what this is, even though they don't. Wild, accidental mead. Somewhere between rainwater, wild yeast, and thyme, this honey has begun fermenting on its own. You watch as the humans sniff it, tilt their heads, and dip their fingers into the golden foam. One man tries it, and freezes, eyes widening as if he just unlocked the universe. Then he takes another sip, and another, and suddenly the morning seems a lot more interesting. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Mead, the world's oldest intentionally brewed alcoholic drink, likely began exactly like this: bees creating honeycombs in tree hollows, rainwater mixing in, and natural yeast transforming the mixture into something lightly alcoholic. Archaeologists have found ancient traces of fermented honey beverages across Africa, China, and Europe, hinting that humans didn't just find mead, they probably kept finding it over and over. The quirky tidbit? Some scholars suggest that early humans may have believed bees were magical creatures because enchanted honey water seemed to appear randomly after storms. Imagine trying to explain fermentation without chemistry. All you'd know is that sometimes the tree gives you sleepy, happy juice, and sometimes it just gives you bees. Honestly, it's a gamble. Historians still argue whether early humans started deliberately protecting these water-filled honey hollows like tiny natural breweries, or if it took centuries before anyone recognized the pattern. But as you watch your group now, you can see the gears turning behind their eyes. They're realizing this wasn't an accident, or at least, not a one-time accident. The sun rises a little higher, lighting the honeycomb like stained glass. A woman scoops some into a hollowed-out gourd, holds it up, and swirls it like a prehistoric sommelier. She grins. Then she walks back to camp with a purposeful stride that tells you she fully intends to replicate this magic at home if she can convince the bees to cooperate and not chase everyone away again. You sit beside them as they pass the fermented honey around. The taste is warm and floral, and you swear there's an undertone of firelight, like the memory of last night's figs still woven into the air. Someone leans back, sighing, and the whole group settles into a quiet, golden calm, the kind that feels like a warm blanket wrapped around your brain. This is where things shift. Last night was accident. Today is curiosity. You can feel it in the way they examine the honeycomb, poke at the bubbles, whisper among themselves. You're witnessing the moment humanity begins moving from stumbling into fermented fruit to maybe we can make this stuff on purpose. One gatherer begins tapping a soft rhythm with a stick as others sway gently, half asleep, half dreaming. You smile because humans discovering alcohol seems to trigger the same three things it always has: music, storytelling, and someone insisting they're totally fine to walk back. No, really. As the morning warms, you follow them farther into the forest. Bees hum overhead, guiding you deeper, as if nature herself is inviting you to peek behind the curtain. And you do, walking through golden light, past tall grasses and wildflowers, knowing that from these simple, sticky beginnings, entire cultures will one day raise glasses in celebration, heartbreak, victory, and grief. For now, though, it's just you and a group of early humans carrying a sloshing gourd of bubbly honey water back to camp. You trail behind them, amused, thinking that thousands of years from now, someone will still be saying, "One more drink won't hurt," while discovering, much like these foragers, that sometimes it absolutely will. You drift along behind the little group as the forest shifts from golden morning to warm afternoon, the sunlight dappling across your path. The camp has settled after the honey-drunk excitement, and now they're gathering fruit again, berries, soft pears, anything they can mash into a paste to eat later. You follow them to a clearing where someone dumps a torn basket of overripe fruit into a shallow pit lined with stones. The moment it hits, the mush releases a soft hiss, like a tiny sigh rising from the earth. You lean closer and inhale that familiar tang fermentation, already humming beneath the surface. They stir the mush with sticks, hands, whatever's nearby, smearing juice across their arms and shoulders until everyone looks like they fought a losing battle with a fruit monster. You sit beside them, listening to the swish, squish, plop of the mixture as it slides into a smoother consistency. Something happens whenever humans gather around a shared bowl. Their voices soften, their bodies relax, and they begin to tell stories even when they don't quite have the words yet. Tonight, you're hearing their earliest myths, half gestures, half sounds about animals, the stars, and a giant bird that definitely does not exist but sounds like it could ruin your week. Here's your mainstream historical fact. As early villages formed, people discovered that mashed fruit, left to sit, especially in warm climates, fermented quickly into primitive wine-like drinks. Archaeologists believe some of the earliest semi-intentional alcohol experiments involved nothing more than pits, fruit, and time. No fancy equipment, no measuring, just nature doing her thing. Your quirky tidbit arrives when one of the villagers eagerly scoops up a handful of bubbling mash and smears it across a flat stone, watching it fizz. Some anthropologists actually think early humans may have viewed fermentation as a kind of living spirit, because the bubbling looked like breath. Imagine discovering carbonation for the first time and deciding the fruit is alive. In their defense, you'd probably make that mistake too if your scientific vocabulary consisted mostly of pointing. Historians still argue whether early villagers truly understood that yeast, tiny organisms they couldn't see, was responsible for the magical transformation. But while the academic world debates, your villagers simply shrug, grin, and taste it again, because priorities. They settle into a rhythm. Around the pit, crushing fruit with their palms and elbows. Someone tosses in a handful of flowers because why not? Another person adds a few wild herbs. Suddenly, it looks like the world's earliest smoothie bar run by people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing, but are definitely having more fun than you. You watch them carry the mash into a simple container made from a large animal stomach stretched tight against wooden sticks. Not glamorous, but incredibly effective. Early fermentation vessels often looked exactly like this. Organic, leak-resistant, and just big enough to let things bubble without exploding. Well, usually. The scent grows richer as the afternoon heat warms the mixture. You sit beside it, listening to faint pops inside the container like the earth is whispering tiny secrets. Someone rests a hand on your shoulder, offering you a taste they're proud of this concoction. You sip it, and the flavors roll across your tongue. Sweet, tangy, earthy. The texture is thick, almost chewy, and you can feel heat blooming in your chest the moment you swallow. It isn't strong, not yet, but it's enough to nudge your thoughts into softer shapes. A kid nearby becomes your third joke of the section, because he's poking the fermenting bowl with a look of utter betrayal, like he expected fruit and got sparkling soup instead. He sniffs it, and instantly makes a face you recognize as universal. This is weird. I like it, but I also hate it. The pit becomes the center of the evening. People hum songs, repetitive, soothing rhythms that match the slow bubbling of the fruit. You lean back and gaze at the sky as streaks of purple slide into view. The village seems calmer tonight, as if the fizzy fruit mash has taken the sharp edges off the day. A woman begins painting a simple symbol on a rock nearby, a circle with small dots. She glances at the bubbling mash, then back at her drawing. You're witnessing one of those perfect little historical echoes, the way alcohol shapes culture long before writing, long before science, long before anyone can explain what's happening in the bowl. Later, another person carefully covers the fermenting container with leaves and warm stones, creating something almost ritualistic. They don't call it brewing, they don't call it crafting, but you can feel it. This is the first spark of intention. They're not just letting fruit rot, they're nurturing it. You curl into the soft grass as night settles in, the first stars peeking through. The pit gurgles softly beside you, like a sleepy creature settling down for the night. The village quiets. For a moment, everything is still warm, gentle, content. And as your eyes close, you realize you've just watched humanity shift from pure accident to experiment, from discovery to creation. The journey has begun. You wake to the low murmur of voices, soft, steady, half asleep. The village is stirring, the fire just embers now, and a thin mist drifts across the early ground. You stretch and follow a few people moving toward the grain storage pits at the edge of the settlement. These pits are simple, shallow hollows lined with mud, grass, and woven mats, but they're treasures, holding the community's precious supply of wild barley and early wheat. Except today, something has gone terribly, wonderfully, wrong. You kneel beside them, as one man lifts the cover. Instantly, you smell it. Warm, sour, doughy, with a hint of funk that makes you tilt your head like a confused puppy. The grains inside are damp, too damp. Rain has seeped through the coverings. The bottom layer is clumped, sticky, and darker than it should be. Someone pokes the mush with a stick, and the stick sinks in with a wet glorp. You lean closer, and there it is again. Foam. Tiny bubbles dancing across the surface. This isn't spoiled grain. Not entirely. This is the earliest whisper of beer. You watch them scoop up handfuls of the mush, squeeze the liquid out, and taste it, hesitant at first, then delighted. Their faces shift from confusion to excitement, because this drink is different from fermented fruit. Earthier, heartier, more filling. It's a drink that feels like food. A drink that warms your belly like a small fire inside your chest. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists have found evidence of grain fermentation going back over 13,000 years, long before pottery or large-scale farming. Some of the earliest beer wasn't filtered or fizzy, it was more like a thick, soupy porridge with a mild alcoholic kick. People probably discovered it exactly like this, by accident, when damp grain started fermenting in storage pits. Your quirky tidbit arrives when one of the villagers tastes the grain mush and immediately starts dancing, a victory dance that looks suspiciously like someone fighting off invisible bees. Early beer-making tools haven't evolved yet, but human enthusiasm apparently has remained the same across millennia. Some anthropologists even suggest that early beer might have been thicker than oatmeal, something you drank, chewed, and almost inhaled at the same time. Congratulations. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and mild buzz. Achieved. Historians still argue whether beer was discovered before bread or bread before beer. The beer-first crowd argues that humans may have settled down primarily to grow grain for brewing. And honestly, watching these villagers now, you can see why that theory keeps gaining traction. They experiment. You follow as they scoop grains into new pits, add a little water from the river, stir with sticks, and cover the whole thing with woven mats. They're not copying a process, they're inventing one. And they don't even know it. A young woman kneels beside the pit, tapping the surface rhythmically with a flat stone. It's not necessary to the process. She just likes the sound. But as she taps, others gather, humming softly. Brewing is becoming more than survival, it's becoming community. A reason to sit together. A reason to tell stories. A reason to return to the same place again and again. You lean back and watch as the group tests the fermenting grains throughout the day. The sun warms the pit. People sniff it, stir it, lift a handful to their lips, and wrinkle their noses if it's not ready. Someone jokes your first joke of the section by pointing at another villager's messy beard and grunting something that clearly means, "Looks like you already drank the whole pit." The group laughs. You smile. Humans have always loved teasing whoever looks the most chaotic. By evening, the mixture has deepened in aroma. They ladle the thick drink into hollow gourds and pass them around. The sound of contented sighs floats through the air like a lullaby. You sip again, and the taste is rustic. Earth plus sunshine plus a little swamp. But it's warm, comforting, grounding. This drink feels like belonging. Someone taps your arm and points to the sky. Stars glitter overhead, brilliant and sharp. The village stretches out beneath them, peaceful, except for the occasional giggle from someone who got a head start on the grain brew. A child falls asleep on a pile of grass, clutching a gourd like it's a prized treasure. You tuck a leaf behind their ear. They don't wake. You glance at the pits again. The gentle bubbling reflecting starlight. This isn't just food. Isn't just drink. Somewhere deep inside, you sense the shift. Brewing is evolving into culture, into identity, into tradition. The night deepens, the breeze cools. You lie back, resting your head against the earth warmed by the day, and listen to the soft bubbling behind you like the world's oldest lullaby rising from the soil. You blink awake to the soft chorus of morning tasks, footsteps brushing against dirt, the dull thud of stones grinding together, the rhythmic swish of woven baskets being emptied. The village has begun another quiet day, but you sense a subtle excitement humming under the surface. People are gathering around one particular clay pot sitting near the fire pit, and the way they circle it, careful, reverent, almost suspicious, tells you something important. This pot wasn't supposed to surprise anyone, and yet, it has. You move closer and crouch beside them. The pot is simple, roughly shaped, with thumbprints still visible in the clay. It was probably used for leftover porridge the night before. But now, as a woman lifts the lid, a warm puff of scented air escapes, sweet, sour, and unmistakably alive. You lean in, and there it is. bubbles dancing along the surface of the mixture, catching tiny glints of sunlight like they're winking at you. This is the moment pottery and fermentation collide, and the villagers look absolutely baffled. One man dips his finger into the liquid and licks it. He pauses, blinks, then breaks into a grin you've only seen when someone finds an entire honeycomb without getting stung. Others follow, each tasting, nodding, murmuring. You realize they're experiencing something new, a drink that's smoother than the grain mush, sweeter than the fruit mash, and blessedly served without a side of sticks or stones. This is your mainstream historical fact. Once humans invented pottery, fermentation changed forever. Pots allowed for controlled temperatures, longer storage, and cleaner brewing. Archaeologists in China discovered 9,000-year-old pottery fragments containing residues of a fermented mixture of rice, fruit, and honey, essentially an ancient cocktail, created almost exactly like what you're watching now. Your quirky tidbit pops up when a tiny child waddles over, peers into the pot, and drops in a handful of random grass with the solemn authority of a master brewer. Several adults gasp, but nobody stops him. And honestly, ancient brewing recipes probably came from toddlers throwing everything they could find into containers. Historians can debate all they want. Toddlers have always been chaotic contributors to science. Historians still argue whether the earliest pottery fermented drinks were intentionally crafted or entirely accidental. But as you watch the villagers gather around this pot, pointing, murmuring, poking it like it might bite, you can tell this was an unplanned masterpiece. They start theorizing in whatever early language way they can. Was it the leftover porridge? Was it the warmth of the embers? Was it the clay? The spirits? The sky? You smile because you know the truth is far less dramatic, but no less magical. Wild yeast landed in their leftovers and decided to throw a microscopic party. You sit nearby as they decide to recreate the accident. Someone mixes new porridge, thinner this time. Another adds crushed berries. Someone else suggests heating the pot just slightly. The group nods, eager, united in this new mystery. They're inventing brewing experimentation right here, right now, one hesitant scoop at a time. While they work, a woman kneads clay on a flat stone, shaping new pots with more rounded bottoms. She glances at the bubbling brew and smirks like she already knows these new vessels will be game changers. Clay pots become their future, not just tools, but symbols of identity, status, ritual. You watch the first hints of ceramics becoming intertwined with alcohol in ways that will echo across the globe. You settle into the grass as the pot warms over the embers again. The villagers aren't rushing, aren't impatient. They sit around it like a small council, humming quietly. A man plucks berries and crushes them between his fingers, letting the juice drip inside. Another fanatically polishes the outside of the pot with a leaf, as if presentation matters thousands of years before anyone invents Michelin stars. Someone tries to tap, on the pot, listening for changes. You tilt your head along with them. All you hear is the faint gurgle of fermentation, but to them, it's a mystery worth solving. In this moment, the pot is more than a container. It's a storyteller, bubbling with secrets. As the day warms, the smell drifts through the camp. Fruity, floral, a little funky, but appealing. You notice a few villagers pretending they're just passing by, but slowing down dramatically to sniff the pot one more time, like prehistoric wolves circling a new scent. Your second joke arrives here. One guy leans so close his hair dips in, and he jerks back instantly, trying to pretend he meant to do that. Spoiler, he did not. Time passes, shadows shift. The pot cools. When they finally taste it again at dusk, you watch their faces soften. The drink is gentler, smoother, easier. It warms rather than shocks. It fills the belly without overwhelming it. They sip, sigh, sip again. The pot glows in the firelight like a small sun, radiating both heat and discovery. The sky darkens. Stars scatter across the horizon. People pass the pot slowly, reverently. Someone hums a tune, a soft, looping melody that wraps around the moment like a warm blanket. You lean back, letting the rhythm sink into your bones. This is where craft begins, not from precision, but from wonder. Not from recipes, but from accidents embraced. As you close your eyes, you feel the earth cool beneath you, steady and grounding. The pot gurgles one last time, settling into silence. And you drift with it, deeper into the night, carried forward by the gentle glow of clay, curiosity, and the humans who discovered joy inside a simple pot of leftovers. You drift awake to the soft murmur of wind moving through tall grass, carrying the scent of dew, clay, and last night's faint sweetness. The village is buzzing not with urgency, but with that quiet excitement humans get when they're on the edge of a new discovery, but haven't found the words to explain it yet. Today, they're walking, somewhere purposeful. You follow them along a narrow path between stones, as the air grows cooler and the landscape opens into a wide, open field dotted with enormous slabs of rock. You step into the clearing and freeze. Massive stones, arranged with uncanny precision, rise from the earth like giants frozen mid-stride. Some stand upright, others lean or lie flat, forming rough circles and crescent shapes. Moss grows along their surfaces in thick velvet patches. Birds rest on top, calling out lazily into the early light. And in the very center of this ancient stone circle sits something familiar. A cluster of pots, clay, cracked, filled to the brim with bubbling drink. You realize you've just walked into one of the earliest ritual sites long before temples, long before writing. A place where humans come not just to gather, but to celebrate, mourn, offer, and apparently to sip something fermented enough to calm their nerves around. Giant rocks that probably felt a lot more magical than geology. You wander closer, stepping between towering stones. The ground pulses with footsteps from people arriving in small groups, families from distant valleys, hunters with feathered cloaks, travelers carrying bundles of grain and dried berries. They greet one another with nods, embraces, soft hums. This is a gathering, a ritual, and fermented drink is at the center of it. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists have found evidence at ancient ceremonial sites like Göbekli Tepe and other pre-agricultural sacred spaces, suggesting that large feasts involving fermented beverages took place long before the invention of cities. Some even argue these communal rituals may have preceded farming, not followed it. But it's your quirky tidbit that makes you grin. Some early stone circles show signs of enormous stone basins, carved deliberately to hold liquid, possibly beer or ritual brews. Imagine building a giant rock bowl the size of a bathtub just to host the world's oldest open bar event. Humanity has always been extra. Historians still argue whether these early gatherings were primarily spiritual, social, or drunkenly improvisational. Watching this scene unfold, you suspect it was probably all three. You sit near the pots in the center. The fermented drink inside is darker than usual, made from grain, berries, and something aromatic you can't quite identify. Several villagers kneel, dipping carved wooden ladles in and offering small portions to the group. Each person sips slowly, eyes closing, heads tilting upward, as if listening to the stones themselves. Someone lightly taps one of the large slabs with a rounded stone hammer, producing a deep, resonant gong. The sound vibrates through your chest. Another answers with a higher, ringing note. Together, these tones weave into a primitive rhythm, echoing across the clearing, bouncing between great stone faces. It feels like the earth is singing back. A girl beside you dips her fingers into the bubbling brew and smears a line of it along a stone surface. She steps back, proud, as the liquid slowly drips downward like a liquid offering. Some ancient cultures genuinely believed fermented drink was a bridge between humans and spirits. Watching this moment, you understand why. As the ritual deepens, more pots appear carried on woven mats, wrapped in fiber. People uncover them carefully, revealing mixtures of fruit, herbs, and spices. Each pot smells different, tastes different, tells a different story. You notice patterns carved into some, spirals, circles, lines. Brewing is no longer just food. It's identity, status, expression. And then comes the predictable moment, the section's joke, when a young man tries to lift a pot that's clearly too heavy. He wobbles, groans, takes 2 heroic steps, and then the pot slips. The entire crowd gasps in unison. Miraculously, he catches it at the last second. His relieved grin earns a wave of teasing laughter. One elder smacks the back of his head affectionately. Some things truly never change. You wander deeper into the stone circle, as chanting begins, not words, not exactly, just tones that rise and fall like waves. People sway slowly, eyes half closed. The sound harmonizes with the buzzing ferment in the pots and the soft sigh of wind moving through the stones. Nothing in this moment is chaotic. Everything is deliberate, measured, rhythmic. They're entering a shared state of mind guided by sound, ritual, and a drink that warms the soul. As dusk begins to float in, torches are lit around the great stones. Shadows dance across their surfaces, forming shapes that might be animals or spirits or just tricks of the flickering light. Someone places a pot at the foot of one massive slab, as if giving a gift to the stone itself. You step back, letting the ritual wash over you. The air smells of herbs, smoke, and sweet fermenting grain. People murmur, hum, sway, sip. The place feels ancient and alive, like the stones are watching, listening, remembering. And as the sky turns purple, you feel the story drifting forward. Humans aren't just discovering alcohol anymore. They're weaving it into ceremony, into meaning, into the quiet space between earth and sky. Fermentation has become mystical, communal, sacred. The night deepens, the stones glow, and you breathe slowly, letting the hum of ritual and the warmth of early sacred brews settle into your bones like a gentle lullaby. You wake to the steady thump of footsteps on packed earth, not frantic, not panicked, but rhythmic, purposeful. The world has shifted again. Gone are the tiny forager camps and the scattered villages with clay pots tucked between stones. Now you're walking into the first hum of a true city, the air buzzing with life, heat, dust, and the unmistakable scent of grain brewing somewhere nearby. You step onto broad, sun-baked streets lined with mud brick houses stacked like warm loaves of bread. Smoke drifts lazily from flat rooftops. Vendors call out in a language still forming, offering baskets of barley, clay jars of dates, and strange breads you can't quite identify but absolutely want to. The clatter of tools rings out in the distance. But what draws your attention immediately is the one thing that every person here seems to be holding: a long straw made of reeds. You follow the straws to their source, large communal vats made of clay, sunk into the ground like small wells. Each is filled with a thick, bubbling, porridge-like drink. Ancient beer. Real beer. The kind workers line up for, the kind priests bless, the kind accountants tally, the kind that will build empires. You crouch beside a vat as a worker dips his reed in and drinks with the seriousness of someone who believes hydration is a spiritual duty. He sighs, wipes his mouth, and returns to hauling bricks like he just fueled up at the world's earliest brewery cafe. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Mesopotamia, beer wasn't just a beverage, it was a staple food. Workers often received beer rations as part of their wages, sometimes up to several liters a day. It was nutritious, filling, and most importantly safer to drink than river water. Early tablets even recorded daily beer allotments with tiny pictographs of jugs and straws. Your quirky tidbit arrives when you notice a small clay tablet next to one of the vats. On it is a drawing of what looks like two people sharing a giant jar of beer with long straws drinking together in a way that suggests romance, teamwork, or maybe just, no, I don't trust you not to hog it all. Archaeologists genuinely found similar beer scene carvings and still aren't sure if they depict love, ritual, or ancient meme culture. Historians still argue whether the rise of beer contributed to the formation of early cities, or if cities simply intensified brewing out of necessity. But as you look around, seeing workers refreshed, priests measuring, scribes documenting, and children pretending to drink from empty reeds, you suspect brewing. And urban life grew up together like two siblings who can't be separated. You wander deeper through the bustling streets. Every corner has something new. Bakers kneading barley dough, merchants selling dried hops like herbs, women carrying pots filled with fermenting mash. Music drifts through the air, soft drums, wooden flutes, and the rhythmic chanting of workers timing their labor. You pause at a massive ziggurat rising in the distance, its steps steep and shimmering in the sun. Priests walk down carrying jars, heavy, decorated, sealed with clay stoppers carved with symbols. They're taking beer to the temple, not just for themselves, but for the gods. You follow them inside, where the cool air smells of incense, smoke, and sweet malt. They pour offerings into carved basins, letting the beer seep into the stone as a gift to whichever celestial beings supposedly watch over the city. One priest taps the jar and listens, nodding as though the sound tells him everything he needs to know about the brew's quality. And honestly, it might. Outside again, a group of workers invites you to sit with them beneath a reed awning. Someone hands you a straw. You lean in and sip, and instantly understand why this drink became a cultural foundation. It's thick, warm, slightly sour, but oddly refreshing under the blazing sun. It's also comforting, like liquid bread, steadying your mind and body. The workers laugh, tease, joke, and for a moment you're simply one of them, sharing a drink after a long shift under an unforgiving sky. One man gestures dramatically at the vat and announces something proudly, your section's joke, likely translated as, "This is the good batch." The last one tasted like boiled sandals. His friends howl with laughter, nodding, clearly remembering the infamous sandal batch. You pat him on the shoulder. Every era has that one failed homebrew everyone pretends never happened. As the sun sets, the city transforms. Streets glow amber as torches ignite. Families gather on rooftops, sipping evening beer and watching stars appear. A child asleep beside you clutches a tiny clay mug like a security blanket. The world feels bigger now, richer, louder, and yet somehow still wrapped in the same warmth you felt back in those small camps of foragers. The beer vats gurgle softly nearby, their surfaces shimmering in the torchlight. Workers finish their final sips for the day. Scribes close their tablets. Priests place offerings on altars. And as night unfurls across the city like a dark, protective cloak, you lie back against the cool stone and exhale. You feel the story continuing, not just a tale of fermentation, but a tale of civilization itself rising on the gentle, bubbling backbone of beer. Humans didn't just brew to get drunk. They brewed to nourish, to gather, to celebrate, to work, to worship, to survive. And as the stars sharpen above the first great cities of the world, you let the night cradle you, drifting into the soft hum of ancient life and the warm, grainy lull of a drink that helped shape humanity. You wake to the soft rustle of vines moving in the morning breeze, the air warm and tinged with the faint, fruity sweetness that only one thing can produce: grapes. Not just a few scattered vines growing wild, but entire hillsides layered with them, stretching across the landscape like emerald waves. You're standing at the birth of wine, not the accidental fruit mush of ancient forests, not the fizzy leftovers in clay pots, but the intentional cultivation of grapes for one purpose: turning them into something divine. You follow the workers as they move through the vineyard, their feet brushing against dry soil warmed by the rising sun. Basket after basket fills with heavy, ripe grapes. Some are dark as night, others glow golden in the light. The air vibrates with quiet chatter, anticipation mixed with reverence. This isn't just harvest, this is ceremony. You trail them toward a stone platform where grape pressing is underway. A group of women and men step into a shallow basin carved into the rock, their feet sinking into cool, juicy grapes with a satisfying squish. Juice splashes up their legs, staining their skin and clothes. They laugh softly, rhythmically as they stomp, twist, and step in unison. You feel your shoulders loosen. Something about the whole scene feels both ancient and oddly therapeutic, like watching someone make bread or knead clay. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The earliest evidence of deliberate winemaking comes from ancient regions like Georgia, Armenia, and Iran, with pottery vessels containing tartaric acid grape residue dating back about 8,000 years. These people didn't just stumble into wine. They engineered it, refined it, and eventually turned it into a cultural pillar. Your quirky tidbit bubbles up when you notice a small carving on a clay jar nearby. A person lying down dramatically with grapes falling over their head. Archaeologists found similar ancient doodles, and while no one can say for sure, it's very possible someone invented the world's first wine meme long before emojis existed. Historians still argue whether early wine was primarily ceremonial or simply enjoyable. But as you follow the baskets of grapes moving from the press into large clay jars half buried in the ground, you can sense a dual purpose. Nourishment, yes, but also transcendence. Inside a cool storage room carved into the hillside, dozens of enormous clay vessels sit with their mouths sealed, using wet clay and woven cloth. They rest like sleeping giants, each holding a whole season's worth of sunlight, water, and quiet human hope. A worker taps one, gently listening for the faint shift of liquid inside. Another adjusts the placement of jars so temperature stays steady. Everything is deliberate, thoughtful. Wine is no longer an accident. It's alchemy. But you feel another current running beneath this vineyard, a spiritual one. Stories drift through the air, whispered in the half-formed languages of early civilizations. Tales of gods who bleed wine instead of blood. Gods who bring chaos and joy through the grapevine. Gods who demand offerings of fermented sweetness in return for rain, protection, and fertility. You follow a group of priests toward a small stone altar overlooking the vineyard. They carry jugs of freshly pressed grape juice, pouring some onto the earth before sealing the rest for fermentation. The juice soaks into the soil like a crimson blessing. The priests chant, their voices rising and falling like wind brushing through leaves. You stand quietly, feeling the weight of ceremony, a sense that these people believe wine is not just a drink, but a sacred exchange between humans and the divine. Later in the day, a group of revelers gathers for a feast. The sun sets in a blaze of orange and gold, reflecting off clay cups filled with early wine. You take a cup and raise it to your lips. The taste is wild, less refined than modern wine, cloudy, tart, a little unpredictable, but alive. You feel warmth bloom through your chest and seep slowly into your limbs, grounding you while making the world feel a little dreamlike. Someone nudges you and points at a man who has clearly had just enough wine to perform interpretive dance in front of everyone. This is your section's joke. His movements look like he's trying to reenact the life cycle of a grape. People laugh softly, encouraging him. No one is embarrassed. This is celebration. This is connection. As night deepens, the feast grows livelier, but never chaotic. Torches illuminate smiling faces. Storytellers weave myths of vine-born deities. Musicians play flutes and simple drums. You lie back on a woven mat, the scent of crushed grapes still clinging to your skin, and watch the stars shimmer above the vineyard like tiny spilled droplets of light. The air is warm, peaceful, ancient. You can feel the continuity, how fermentation has evolved from chance to craft to something divine. How humans have fallen in love with this strange art that turns ordinary fruit into poetry in a cup. You close your eyes, letting the music blend with the soft rustle of grape leaves in the wind, knowing the story is still unfolding. And wine is only the beginning. You drift awake to heat dry, pulsing, rising from the ground like invisible waves. The air tastes like dust and sun-baked stone. You blink your eyes open and find yourself in a desert landscape the color of honey. Endless dunes, clusters of date palms swaying like dancers, and in the distance, the silhouette of a caravan slowly making its way across the horizon. You follow the caravan, camels groaning, bells ringing softly, traders wrapped in linen against the sun. Their movements are patient, practiced. These people know the desert well, and they know how to survive it. You walk with them toward a small oasis tucked between cliffs. Palm trees lean over a pool of water so still it reflects the sky like polished metal. But that's not where they're going. Instead, they head straight for a cluster of clay jars tucked into the cool shadows of a rock wall. Jars that look ordinary until someone pulls one open, releasing a burst of sweet, yeasty scent that makes your eyes widen. You step closer as a trader pours out a maiko, pale, cloudy liquid into a shallow bowl. It smells warm, fruity, slightly sharp like honey, dates, and sunshine mixed into something that's been sleeping underground. Someone hands you a bowl. You lift it, inhale, and realize exactly what this is. Date wine. Palm sap turned heady and divine by time, yeast, and desert survival instinct. Here's your mainstream historical fact. For thousands of years, people in the Middle East and North Africa tapped date palms for sap, letting it ferment into a sweet, mildly alcoholic drink. In hot climates, fermentation happened fast, sometimes within hours, so travelers often stored palm sap in cool jars buried in the shade, just to keep it drinkable. Your quirky tidbit strolls in when a young boy proudly demonstrates how to tap a palm tree by climbing it barefoot and gently slicing the bark to encourage sap flow. Halfway up, he gets distracted by a lizard and nearly falls, then insists he meant to do that. You try not to laugh. Early palm sap tapping was genuinely acrobatic, risky work. Some cultures even assigned the job to the most agile teenagers because they healed the fastest when they inevitably slipped. Historians still argue whether palm sap drinks began as a hydration technique or as a ritual one, but seeing these traders now sunburned, tired, and deeply grateful for the cool sweetness inside those jars, you're leaning towards survival first, celebration second. The caravan settles beside the oasis. Camels kneel with dramatic sighs. Traders unload baskets of dates, salt, spices, and fabrics. Some gather around the clay jars, dipping bowls and exchanging stories in hushed tones. You sit with them, sipping slowly. The drink is cool from being stored against the rock, the flavor rich and caramel-like with a hint of spice. It coats your tongue and warms your belly, even as a breeze cools your skin. Nearby, under the shade of a palm, a group of elders prays quietly before drinking, offering thanks to the trees that keep them alive in a landscape that cares nothing for their comfort. You feel the desert's silence press gently around you. Vast, ancient, indifferent, and yet Humans have found a way to make even this place taste sweet. Later in the afternoon, they show you how some clay jars are sealed for long journeys. They pack fresh date mash at the bottom, pour palm sap on top, add herbs or resin, and seal the lids with wax and woven fiber. These jars become the desert's treasure chests, small, portable breweries carried across miles of unforgiving sand. One trader lifts a jar to demonstrate how sloshing affects fermentation. The others groan because they know what's coming next. He shakes it anyway. A moment later, pot foam bursts from the lid, spraying everyone nearby in sticky date fizz. This is your section's joke. The man proudly declares this is a sign of great quality, while everyone else wipes their faces and mutters something you don't need a dictionary to understand. The sun dips lower. The desert shifts from scorching gold to soft rose. Shadows stretch long across the sand. The caravan prepares a simple meal, flatbread, dried fish, roasted dates, and pours more of the fermented drink. The conversation turns warmer, looser, the laughter easier. You lie back on a folded blanket, the sky above you blooming into purple and silver. Stars appear sharp and clear, untouched by city light. The air cools enough that you pull your wrap tighter around your shoulders. The desert always surprises you. Hot one minute, cold the next. Timeless, always. Near the rock wall, the clay jars cool in the shade, ready for the next day's journey. The traders hum a low melody, a wandering tune meant to guide thoughts toward sleep. You let your eyes close, feeling your heartbeat slow, your mind soften, your breath deepen. The drink, the desert, the night, they blend together into something ancient and soothing, and as you drift off beneath the endless sky, you realize the truth. Humans didn't just discover alcohol. They carried it across continents, deserts, oceans, and empires, not just for pleasure, but for comfort, ritual, and survival. You drift awake to the clatter of hooves on hard-packed dirt, the creak of wooden wheels, and the soft jingle of metal ornaments swaying against cloth. When your eyes open, you're no longer in the desert. You're standing on the edge of a bustling crossroads, one of the arteries of the ancient world. Caravans converge from every direction. Traders from the Far East with silks and strange resins, merchants from the West bearing olive oil and wine, nomads from the steppes carrying bundles of herbs and secrets whispered in the wind. But you're not here for the merchandise. You're here because somewhere among the spices, bronzeware, and jade figurines, people are passing around a rumor, a whisper about a drink that is stronger, clearer, sharper than anything found in grain pits, clay pots, or desert jars. You follow the murmurs to a shaded tent lined with colorful fabrics. Inside, a man lifts a small copper vessel shaped like a teardrop. Steam curls from its narrow spout. A group sits around him, watching as he pours a clear liquid into tiny cups made from fired clay. The scent is sharp, almost fiery, and unlike anything you've smelled before. It's warm, metallic, and somehow clean. You sit beside them, listening quietly. One trader explains that this is a rake, a distilled drink, learned from travelers far to the east. Another claims it comes from alchemists who spent years trying to capture the spirit of fermented fruit. Others say it was discovered by accident when someone tried to heat wine on a stove that was far too hot. No one agrees, but everyone sips. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Long before distillation became widespread, early forms of the technique traveled along trade routes like the Silk Road. While the exact origins of strong spirits remain debated, early Chinese and Middle Eastern scientists experimented with the principles long before Europe knew such a drink existed. Your quirky tidbit arrives when a young merchant tries to sniff the distilled liquid too enthusiastically and ends up coughing so hard he nearly falls backward into a spice jar. His friends tease him mercilessly, and he insists the drink is too powerful for ordinary noses. Honestly, he's not wrong. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road spread distillation knowledge through trade, war, scientific exchange, or pure curiosity. Watching the way these travelers interact, you suspect it was all four, and a fair amount of gossip too. You take your cup and sip cautiously. The liquid hits your tongue with a sting, races across your palate, and blooms into warmth that spreads through your chest like a rising sun. It's unlike beer, wine, or palm sap. This is something distilled, something concentrated. You're tasting the earliest ancestor of spirits. Someone beside you, the tent's host, begins to explain using gestures and fragments of language. He points to fermented fruit, then mimics heating it, then collects the steam, with exaggerated movements, pretending to chase it like a mosquito. Everyone laughs. But through the exaggerated pantomime, The truth is clear. They're heating fermented liquid until it evaporates, then cooling the vapor to capture something purer, more potent. A simple process on paper, but revolutionary in practice. You wander the encampment, noticing the diversity of containers holding different alcoholic drinks. Clay jars from Persia, bamboo tubes from China, leather skins from nomads. Glass pieces that seem almost impossibly clear for the era. Every culture has its own drink, its own technique, its own rituals. And here, on this road, they collide, merge, and evolve. A group of Chinese travelers gathers around a large pot with a coil of metal emerging from it, an early form of distillation tech. They heat a rice wine mixture over a low flame. The air fills with steam that curls through the coil and drips into a clay cup. This liquid is smoother, softer, but still carries that unmistakable distilled warmth. You sip again, and your shoulders loosen instantly. The warmth feels like a silk thread winding through your veins. A trader from India offers you a small piece of jaggery to eat with the drink, explaining that sweetness tames the spirit inside. Another, from Central Asia, insists the best way to drink it is with dried apricots. You try both, just to be safe. Night begins to fall. The crossroads transforms from bustling marketplace to glowing tapestry of lanterns swaying in the wind. Travelers sit around fires, each group sharing their own variations of fermented and distilled drinks, rice wines, fruit wines, herbal brews, things that smell like medicine and taste like fire, and things that taste like honey and feel like a warm blanket. Someone begins singing a low, wandering melody that drifts through the encampment. Others join, creating a chorus of unfamiliar languages blending into a single, peaceful hum. You lie back on a woven rug, the ground warm beneath you from the day's heat. Sparks rise from nearby fires and float upward like tiny stars joining their elders in the sky. This place, this road, this moment here is where ideas spread, where inventions migrate, where the knowledge of how to turn grain into beer, grapes into wine, and vapor into spirit becomes shared human heritage. You sip the last drops of your distilled drink. The warmth fills you, soft and steady, and as the night deepens around you, lit by lanterns and laughter, you realize how profoundly alcohol has woven itself into human connection, how every cup passed tonight carries not just flavor, but centuries of storytelling, invention, and shared curiosity. You drift awake to a soft metallic ping, a sound so out of place in the ancient world that you sit up immediately. The air is crisp, cooler than the desert, cooler than the crossroads. You're in a small settlement nestled between rolling hills, where smoke curls lazily from clay chimneys and the scent of heated grain lingers in the air like an unfinished sentence. Something important is happening here, something experimental, something dangerous, something that feels like the universe holding its breath. You follow the metallic ping to a modest hut with walls of packed earth and a roof of thatch weighed down by stones. Inside, a man crouches beside a strange contraption. A pot balanced over a fire, fitted with a narrow copper tube that snakes through a clay pot of cool water. The setup looks unstable enough to take out half the village, but the man leans in proudly, listening for changes you can't yet hear. This is an early distiller, not fully understanding what he's doing, but absolutely committed to doing it anyway. He motions for you to come closer. You crouch, listening. Inside the pot, a thick mash of fermented grain bubbles softly. Steam rises, travels through the copper tube, and condenses into clear drops that fall slowly, deliberately, into a tiny clay bowl beneath the spout. Each drop feels like witnessing a secret. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early distillation was first used for perfumes, oils, and medicine, not alcohol. But as alchemists across ancient Persia, Egypt, and China tinkered with apparatuses, someone inevitably tried running fermented liquid through them. The result? The first strong spirits humans ever tasted far more potent than beer or wine. Your quirky tidbit arrives in the form of an old woman sitting by the door, muttering warnings about the spirit inside the bottle. She insists the device traps tiny sky demons and squeezes out their tears. Nobody corrects her, because honestly, the drink does burn like the wrath of a demon. Early communities often treated distilled alcohol as magical or dangerous, and considering the explosions, fires, and surprise blackouts it caused, they weren't entirely wrong. Historians still argue whether the first true distilled alcohol was born in China, Persia, or the Mediterranean. But watching the scene unfold here, this humble hut, the experimental energy, the not yet exploded equipment, you realize the exact origin matters less than the moment itself. Humans learning to manipulate vapor. The man lifts the clay bowl toward you. The liquid inside looks like water, but smells like fire. You take the tiniest sip and immediately feel it race across your tongue, blaze down your throat, and erupt like a tiny sun in your veins. Your eyes water, your heartbeat stumbles. The old woman cackles triumphantly. The distiller beams with pride. You sit outside for a moment to recover, staring at the sky like it personally offended you. One of the villagers offers you a chunk of bread to ground the fire. You take it. It helps a little. The afternoon unfolds with more experiments. The distiller mixes fruit mash, herb-infused wine, even leftover date sap into the apparatus, trying to understand which liquids yield the clearest, strongest result. Sometimes the output is harsh, sometimes sweet, sometimes shockingly smooth. He scribbles symbols on clay tiles, attempts at tracking results. You realize you're witnessing the birth of trial and error science applied to alcohol. A crowd begins forming outside the hut as word spreads. People whisper, unsure whether the device is genius, madness, or an elaborate way to cook the air. Children creep closer, wide-eyed, convinced the copper tube is alive. A dog sits stubbornly nearby, determined to lick any spilled drops like a furry guardian of forbidden knowledge. Then, predictably, the mistake happens. The distiller, growing overconfident, increases the fire. The pot rattles. The old woman yells something that sounds like, "You'll summon death." You step back. The pot sputters, hiccups, and whoomph! A burst of steam shoots from the side, startling everyone but causing no real harm. Your section's joke lands here. The distiller coughs, wipes soot from his eyebrows, and declares proudly, "This means it's working better." The crowd groans. You laugh a little too hard. By late afternoon, the distiller has settled into a safer rhythm. Drops fall steadily into a new bowl, clearer this time, cooler, almost crystalline in appearance. He holds it up to the light, and the entire crowd hushes. This is not just drink. This is refinement, concentration, transformation. Evening settles over the village like a warm blanket. The hills glow amber. Smoke rises from cooking fires. The distiller's hut hums softly as the apparatus continues its delicate dance of heat and vapor. You sit outside with the villagers, passing a small cup of the finished spirit around the circle. Each person takes only a sip respectfully, cautiously. The warmth that follows is gentle but deep, like embers blooming in your chest. Someone begins humming a simple tune. Others join in. The rhythm blends with the faint bubbling sound behind you. You feel it clearly now. Humanity has crossed another threshold. From fermented fruit on the forest floor to carefully coaxed vapor dripping into a bowl, humans have moved from accidental drunkenness to intentional, concentrated craftsmanship. Distillation will change medicine, trade, ritual, and culture forever. As the stars emerge, sharp, bright, silent, you lean back, breathing in the cool night air as the warmth of early spirits settles through you like a slow-burning candle. The village is peaceful, the hills steady, the copper still whispers behind you, and the long journey through humanity's evolving relationship with alcohol flows on. You wake to the crackle of torches and the low rumble of drums. The air feels heavier now, thicker with smoke, spices, and the unmistakable anticipation that only comes before a feast. Not just any feast, but the kind people plan for weeks, the kind where alliances are born, grudges are settled, stories are traded, and reputations are very easily shattered after. Enough fermented courage. You follow the noise toward a large clearing, illuminated by rows of torches. Wooden tables are stacked with bowls of roasted meat, fresh bread, herbs, and most importantly, jugs of every fermented drink the region can produce. Grain beer, fruit wine, herbal brews, something green and mysterious that looks like it's made from angry plants. People gather around the tables, laughing, arguing, singing, all waiting for permission to begin. At the center stands a chief, a broad-shouldered figure wearing a cloak trimmed with animal fur. He raises a carved cup toward the sky. The crowd quiets instantly. Even the drums fall silent. The chief begins a chant, honoring ancestors, the harvest, the spirits, and the drinks that keep the community warm through long winters. When he finishes, he takes a long, slow sip, and the crowd erupts in cheers. The feast has begun. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many ancient societies, Celts, Scythians, early Germanic tribes, Even Zhou-era China used alcohol during feasts to bond warriors, cement alliances, or seal negotiations. Drinking together wasn't just fun, it was political. To refuse a shared cup could be an insult. To accept it meant trust. Your quirky tidbit arrives at a nearby table where a group of young warriors test their strength by chugging beer out of horn-shaped cups longer than their forearms. One guy gets halfway through, burps so loudly it startles a horse behind him, and then proudly declares himself champion of the evening. No one corrects him. The horse looks unimpressed. Historians still argue whether alcohol made ancient negotiations smoother or more chaotic. Watching this crowd, you're leaning toward absolutely both. Deals get made, oaths get sworn, and then someone misinterprets a side-eye and suddenly a tense dance-off breaks out. Human diplomacy has always had flexible boundaries. You sit among villagers passing around clay cups filled with warm, spiced beer. The women beside you discuss the year's harvest. The men across the table compare hunting stories in a competition so exaggerated it should honestly require judges. Kids sneak sips when the adults aren't watching, then pretend to regret it with dramatic gagging faces. Behind you, a bard begins a story. His voice rises above the noise, weaving through the feast like smoke through rafters. He tells of ancient heroes who drank from enchanted cauldrons, gods who gifted humans the knowledge of brewing, and kings who tried unsuccessfully to outlaw strong drink because they were tired of waking up at feasts they barely remembered. The crowd cheers at the good parts, boos at the villains, and applauds wildly when the bard throws in a joke about the local chieftain's cooking. Even the chieftain laughs, always a good sign. As night deepens, the feast shifts. Warriors challenge each other to contests. Spear throwing, wrestling, foot races illuminated by moonlight. But the most intense competition happens around a fire pit, where a group gathers to play a drinking game involving dice carved from bone. The rules are unclear, but the chaos is universal. One man rolls the dice, gets a symbol that looks like a fish, and immediately has to stand on one leg while drinking. Another rolls what resembles a tree, prompting him to give a speech about his deepest dreams. Everyone groans. Your section's joke lands here. His dream is to own the world's biggest spoon. Nobody knows why. He's committed to the narrative. They let him finish. You wander through the feast, absorbing the warmth and noise. Someone offers you a cup of a thick, honey-sweet drink made with herbs and fruit. You sip it slowly. It tastes like sunlight trapped in liquid form and quickly softens your thoughts into pleasant fog. Nearby, a woman feeds the fire with aromatic branches, sending curls of scented smoke into the night sky. The chieftain moves from group to group, listening to disputes, settling arguments, blessing children, and accepting toasts from nearly everyone. Alcohol makes the conversations looser, the tensions lighter, the community tighter, but it also leads to complications. At one point, two warriors argue over who has a better beard. Not strength, not skill, beards. They stand nose to nose until a grandmother strolls between them, hands them a single cup, and says, "Share this, then go sit down. You both look ridiculous." They obey instantly. Feasts run on food, drink, and the iron authority of grandmothers. As the feast winds down, people lean against one another, sleepy and warm. Couples sneak away into the shadows of nearby huts. Elders hum lullabies by the fading fire. Kids curl up beside dogs, finally dozing off. You sit on a log, sipping the last warm drops from a wooden cup. The fire crackles softly. Sparks drift skyward like tiny spirits joining the stars. Your heartbeat slows. The noise fades into a soothing hum. You realize something important here. Alcohol isn't just a drink. It's a bridge between strangers, between families, between humans and their stories. It loosens the boundaries of fear and pride just enough to let truth slip through. The drums fade. The fires dim. You breathe deeply, letting the warmth settle through you like a slow, ancient lullaby. And the night folds gently around you. You wake to the soft scent of herbs, crushed mint, dried flowers, something sharp like resin warming over a fire. Birds chirp lazily above you. And when you sit up, you realize you're in a place that feels completely different from last night's feast. Gone are the torches, the shouting warriors, the spilled drinks. Now you're inside a quiet structure made of smooth clay walls, sunlight filtering through a narrow slit overhead. Shelves line the room, stacked with jars, baskets, and bundles of plants tied neatly with twine. The air hums gently, like the world is exhaling. This is an early clinic. Or what counts as one, anyway. A healer moves slowly across the room, calm, focused, wearing a robe stitched with symbols you recognize from earlier rituals. She touches jars with practiced hands, murmuring to herself, deciding what to mix today. And as she works, you notice something subtle but unmistakable. Every shelf has at least one jar filled with some kind of fermented liquid. Not for celebration, not for feasts, not even for courage, for medicine. You follow her to a small stone table where a young man sits, clutching his stomach dramatically. The healer pours a warm, herbal brew from a clay jug into a small cup. It looks cloudy, greenish, suspicious. The young man wrinkles his nose but drinks anyway. You can't tell if it's helping or if he's just pretending because he's scared of disappointing her. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient healers across cultures, Egyptians, Greeks, Chinese, Mesopotamians, indigenous societies, used fermented drinks medicinally. Beer was mixed with herbs to treat infections. Wine was used to clean wounds. Alcoholic tinctures preserved roots, bark, and flowers long before refrigeration existed. And then comes your quirky tidbit. Some ancient medical texts casually advised using strong beer as a cure for anything from toothaches to demonic possession. Watching the healer now as she hands another patient what looks like a fermented sludge mixed with crushed insects, you realize, yeah, that tracks. Historians still argue whether early medicinal alcohol was actually effective, or if the placebo effect simply kicked in hard when the healer looked very convinced. But as the room fills with murmurs and steaming cups, you sense something deeper. Belief is half the cure. You watch as the healer moves to an elderly woman with aching joints. She opens a jar of fermented honey infused with bitter herbs. The scent is sharp but soothing. The woman takes a sip and sighs relief, glowing softly through her tired eyes. You notice her relax, shoulders dropping, breaths deepening. Maybe the brew helps, maybe the care helps, probably both. Outside, the village begins to stir. You hear the faint grinding of grain, chickens squawking, someone shouting about a missing sandal. Life goes on, but inside this clinic, everything slows. People sit quietly, waiting for their turn. Each patient is treated not just with drink, but with touch, words, and presence. You sit in a corner as the healer prepares a large clay vessel filled with crushed roots, dried berries, and a fermented rice wine. She stirs it with a carved wooden paddle, murmuring something rhythmic. The mixture swirls like storm clouds. She ladles a small amount into a tiny cup, hands it to a sick child, and taps their forehead gently. The child drinks, grimaces, and then curls up on a mat, already breathing easier. Nearby, a group of young apprentices practice grinding herbs. One sneezes explosively into the mixture. Another yelps as their pestle slips and hits their thumb. Everyone groans, including the healer. This is your section's joke. The sneezer proudly insists that blessed herbs are stronger and should absolutely stay in the bowl. He gets swatted with a reed broom. You follow the healer to the back of the clinic, where she keeps her oldest, most treasured jars. These are filled with long fermented mixtures, sealed with wax, waiting years to mature. Some are dark as night, others golden like the desert sun. She opens one carefully, inhaling the aroma like a sommelier who has seen things you wouldn't understand. She pours a few drops into a tiny dish, mixing it with powdered bark. This is medicine reserved for serious cases, fevers, infections, the kinds of ailments that make elders whisper prayers under their breath. You realize alcohol isn't just indulgence or celebration. It's preservation, extraction, transformation. A way to store the healing power of plants long past their harvest. A tool that keeps life going. The healer steps outside for a moment, calling in a man with a deep wound on his arm. She cleans it with fermented wine, the liquid fizzing faintly against the raw skin. The man winces but doesn't pull away. She wraps the wound with clean linen, ties it tight, and sends him home with instructions to drink a bitter fermented brew twice a day. Don't drink more, she warns sternly. He nods like he absolutely will and absolutely won't follow that rule. As the sun climbs higher, the clinic grows warm. The herbs release their perfume into the air. Patients drift in and out. Some leave healed, others simply comforted. You stand by the door, watching a mother carry her sleepy child outside, humming a lullaby. Behind her, the healer sits with a cup of her own brew, tired, thoughtful, quietly proud. The world outside bustles with life, but inside this clay room, time moves gently. Alcohol here isn't wild, celebratory, or chaotic. It's soft, controlled, purposeful. a companion to healing. You breathe in deeply, letting the warm, herb-scented air settle in your lungs. The hum of the clinic soothes you, and slowly, quietly, you feel the story drift forward once more. You wake to a hush, not silence. Exactly, but the kind of refined quiet that only exists in places where power watches itself carefully. The air is perfumed with incense, rosewater, and something deeper, the faint, sugary tang of aging wine stored in dark, expensive places. When you sit up, you realize you're in a palace, stone walls carved with mythic beasts, silk drapes fluttering like sleepy clouds, courtyards paved with polished marble reflecting the early sun. Servants move with practiced stillness, their footsteps soft, their expressions unreadable. They carry trays covered with cloths, amphorae sealed with wax, and small tasting cups painted with gold leaf. Everywhere you look, wealth glitters quietly. Everywhere you step, someone is making sure you don't ruin an extremely expensive rug. You follow a pair of servants down a hallway, so long it feels like walking through the inside of a scarlet ribbon. At the end is a heavy wooden door carved with lions, rosettes, and vines. When they push it open, cool air spills out, cool enough that goosebumps prickle your arms. Shelves tower on every wall, filled with jars, amphorae, bronze vessels, and clay pots. Each one is marked with elegant symbols, recording origins, ingredients, and, most importantly, ownership. You've stepped into the royal cellar. A man in richly dyed robes stands at the far end, holding a cup in the candlelight. He nods to the servants, takes a sip, and nods again with an expression that says, "Yes, this is acceptable for someone extremely important, and definitely not you." His rings sparkle as he gestures for another amphora to be opened. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Elites in ancient empires, Egyptian pharaohs, Persian kings, Greek aristocrats, Chinese nobles, kept enormous wine and beer cellars. Some stored hundreds of jars at controlled temperatures. Many were sealed and buried with rulers for the afterlife. Royal households often employed full-time cupbearers, tasters, and brewers to ensure the drinks remained safe and exquisite. Your quirky tidbit arrives when a servant pulls out a jar labeled with symbols that look suspiciously like the good stuff, only to reveal a thick, purple sludge that smells like fermented socks. The royal taster takes one sniff, recoils so dramatically he nearly drops the cup, and orders it banished far from civilized noses. Archaeologists found similar jars in real royal tombs, experimental brews no one dared to drink twice. Historians still argue whether these cellars were more about luxury, ritual, or showing off. Watching this scene, you're tempted to say, absolutely showing off, but also ritual. You follow the royal taster into a great hall, where nobles recline on cushioned seats around low tables. Perfumed smoke curls through the air as musicians play soft melodies on harps and flutes. Servants pour delicate wines into golden cups, each drink paired with different foods, roasted meats, figs dipped in honey, spiced barley cakes. Every sip is watched, every reaction analyzed. This is politics disguised as pleasure. The queen enters from a side chamber, her robes shimmering like a sunset poured into fabric. She sits on an elevated cushion and accepts a cup from her most trusted attendant. She sips. The room exhales. Only after she nods in approval does everyone else drink. Conversation begins. Soft, measured, filled with metaphors and subtle barbs. Alcohol here isn't for loosening tongues into chaos. It's for sharpening wit, for revealing truths politely, for creating alliances under fragrant candlelight. You move between groups of nobles. One man boasts about a new vineyard he acquired beyond the coastal hills. He describes the grapes like their children, delicate, promising, easily offended by weather. Another noblewoman swears her family has the secret recipe for a ceremonial wine that opens the mind and strengthens the heart. You try a sip. It tastes like apricots and mystery, but behind the refined veneer lies mischief. A group of palace guards lingers near a doorway, quietly swapping a jug of cheap, strong beer they probably weren't supposed to bring. One guard takes a gulp so big his helmet tips backward. He pretends it was intentional. It was not. This is your section's joke. Two nobles glance over, horrified at the lack of sophistication, while the guards are too busy trying not to hiccup loudly and get demoted. You continue walking until you reach a small courtyard, the kind only royals and their closest insiders know about. A fountain trickles softly. Lanterns sway in the breeze. Here, the queen meets with her advisors' serious faces, deep voices, hands wrapped around cups of a dark, spiced wine reserved only for these meetings. They discuss grain shortages, trade agreements, potential rebellions. Every few sentences, someone sips. Alcohol here acts like a lubricant for politics, a silent partner in every decision, not enough to cloud judgment, just enough to soften tempers and smooth the sharp edges of negotiation. But the palace has another side, a hidden, quieter one. A young princess sneaks into a small storeroom filled with citrus-infused wine, pours herself a tiny cup, tastes it, and scrunches her face at the bitterness. She adds honey. Still too bitter. Adds more honey. Too sweet. She sighs dramatically and sneaks out before anyone catches her, experimenting. You sit beside a balcony, overlooking the palace gardens. Servants below prepared jars of wine for a moonlit ceremony, decorating them with fresh flowers and herbs. Tonight, the royal family will offer drink to the gods, asking for protection, guidance, rain, or maybe just good dreams. The sun sinks low, painting the palace walls in shades of gold and rose. The cellar doors close. The nobles drift away. Musicians pack up their instruments. The air cools. You breathe in the scent of jasmine and aged wine and polished stone. In this world, alcohol is elegance, ritual, status, and strategy. A quiet symbol of power resting behind every gold-rimmed cup. You lean back, letting the palace's soft glow lull your thoughts into stillness. Another chapter shimmering into the night. You wake to the deep, steady toll of a bell, low, resonant, vibrating through the cool morning air like a gentle command. When you open your eyes, the world around you has changed again. No palaces, no feasts, no proud nobles swirling wine in golden cups. Now, you stand in a quiet courtyard paved with worn stones, dew glistening on the grass, and rows of simple wooden buildings arranged with monk-like precision. A monastery, the air smells of bread baking, damp stone, and something earthy yet warm, barley maybe. Malt, yeast. The unmistakable perfume of beer quietly coming to life. You follow a line of hooded figures moving silently toward a long hall. Inside, the walls are lined with shelves filled with scrolls, clay tablets, and stitched manuscripts. Monks sit hunched over desks, copying ancient texts by candlelight. Their quills scratch softly, forming elegant symbols and carefully drawn diagrams. Every so often, someone dips a finger into a small ink bowl and then into another bowl that is suspiciously golden and foamy. You move closer. A monk, without looking up from his writing, slides a cup of ale toward you like he's done this 1,000 times. You take a sip. It's smooth, earthy, slightly sweet, surprisingly refined. This isn't the thick porridge-like beer of ancient cities. This is the result of technique, precision, patience. The monks have turned brewing into science. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monasteries preserved and advanced brewing techniques across Europe. Monks kept detailed written records, recipes, fermentation times, grain measurements. Many modern brewing practices trace their origins to monastic innovation. Your quirky tidbit arrives when a novice monk enters carrying a bucket of hops so big it nearly swallows him. He trips, narrowly avoids catastrophe, and catches himself by grabbing the arm of a very unamused senior monk. The novice squeaks out something that probably means, "Blessings be upon this bucket," and shuffles away. Hops weren't always used in brewing, but once monks realized they preserved beer longer and added flavor, they became essential. Sometimes by accident, sometimes by clumsiness. Historians still argue whether monks brewed primarily for nutrition, charity, or revenue. The truth, watching these halls now, is probably all three. You follow the monks into the cellar, cool, dark, cathedral-like in its own way. Massive oak barrels line the room, each sealed with wax, each marked with a careful symbol. A cross, a moon, a barley stalk, a star. The air hums faintly with the quiet bubbling of fermentation. It feels sacred, holy even. A monk gestures for you to approach a barrel. He lifts a wooden plug and pours a small stream into a cup. This brew is darker, richer, with notes of roasted grain. You sip it, and warmth spreads through you like candlelight behind your ribs. It's calming, grounding. You understand why monks drink it during long fasts. It's practically liquid bread. Above you, the bells toll again. This time calling the monks to the refectory, the dining hall. Long tables stretch across the space. Bowls of stew, Fresh loaves of bread and cups of beer are placed at each seat. The monks eat in silence while one reads from a scroll, his voice echoing gently across the hall. The rhythm is peaceful, almost hypnotic. You sit among them, sipping your ale slowly. It's simple, yes, but created with intention. Brewing here isn't indulgence, it's devotion, a practice as refined as prayer. Later, you walk with an elder monk through a herb garden where mint, sage, rosemary, and medicinal plants grow in neat rows. He points out which herbs flavor beer, which heal the sick, which purify water. You realize their brewing knowledge isn't isolated, it's woven into medicine, agriculture, and spiritual life. He shows you an old manuscript filled with brewing instructions written in detailed script. Measurements, temperatures, timing, drawings of pots and stirring paddles. You've never seen brewing recorded with such precision before. Knowledge turned into text, text turned into legacy. In the courtyard, a group of monks work at a small brewing station, crushing grain, boiling water, stirring a bubbling mixture with long wooden paddles. Steam rises, carrying the smell of malt and herbs. They chant softly as they work, the cadence perfectly aligned with each motion. Brewing as meditation. One monk leans too far over the vat, gets a faceful of steam, and jerks back so dramatically he nearly knocks into the abbot behind him. Your section's joke lands here. The abbot raises an eyebrow and says, "The steam speaks only to those who listen calmly." The monk nods solemnly, while everyone else tries not to laugh. As the sun lowers, painting the sky in amber and violet, the monks light candles throughout the monastery. The brewing hall glows like a sanctuary of warmth and craft. You sit on a bench outside, cup in hand, watching the light flicker gently between the cloisters. The world feels slower here, softer, steadier. You breathe deeply, inhaling malt, herbs, and cool stone. The evening bells toll again deep, rhythmic, comforting, and as their echoes fade into the quiet hills, you feel yourself drift into a stillness that feels ancient and safe. Brewing, once chaotic and accidental, has become an art of patience, discipline, and devotion. And the night settles around you like a woolen cloak, warm and peaceful as you drift deeper into the story. You wake to the groaning creak of timber, the slap of waves against a hull, and the unmistakable tang of salt thick in your nose. When you open your eyes, the whole world is swaying. Not gently, not politely. The kind of swaying that lets you know you are either on a ship or inside the stomach of a whale with questionable navigation skills. Fortunately, it's the first one. You're standing on the deck of a massive wooden vessel, its sails stretched tight by a sharp ocean wind. Ropes whip, seabirds cry. A sailor curses as a bucket skitters past your foot. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, is the scent of rum. Not a gentle waft, not a polite hint, a presence. Below deck, barrels clank and slosh. On deck, sailors pass wooden cups with reckless trust. At the bow, a man with braids down to his elbows is already singing a shanty no one asked for and no one can stop. Welcome to the age of sailors, ships, and rum. You make your way across the deck as the ship pitches. A few sailors sit in a circle, playing dice carved from bone. They cheer each time someone rolls a winning number, and every cheer is followed by someone taking a sip of rum so large it could legally count as a bath. Here's your mainstream historical fact. On long voyages, alcohol became essential not as a luxury, but as survival. Fresh water spoiled quickly, beer stayed drinkable longer, rum and other distilled spirits lasted virtually forever and took up less storage space. The British Royal Navy even issued daily rum rations, famously the tot, to every sailor. Your quirky tidbit arrives from a wide-eyed cabin boy who explains, with the seriousness of a scholar, that rum keeps the ghosts away and also makes storms less rude. He nods earnestly. You nod back. Ghosts probably don't stand a chance around this crew, honestly. Historians still argue whether alcohol strengthened ship morale or absolutely destroyed it. Watching this deck right now, a mix of brotherhood, brawls, songs, naps, regrets, and way too loud laughter, you realize the answer is probably both. Simultaneously, at all times, you move toward the ship's galley, ducking under a low beam. Inside, the cook stirs a cauldron of something that smells like stew fighting for its life. He lifts a ladle, sniffs, grimaces, and promptly splashes in a generous glug of rum. The smell changes immediately. Less alarming, more edible. He grins. "Magic," he mutters. This may be the earliest example of using alcohol to salvage a culinary disaster. You step back onto the deck, just as the quartermaster unlocks a long, iron-banded chest containing the ship's official rum supply. Sailors line up. Each receives their ration, a small wooden cup filled to the absolute brim. Some down it in one go. Others sip slowly, eyes closed, letting the ocean wind mix with the heat of the drink. A few sailors insist rum makes them braver. One claims it makes him smarter. It does not. Another says it lets him talk to dolphins. Also no. This is your section's joke. One sailor swears he heard a seagull insult him personally, and now he's insisting on settling things man to bird. The others drag him away before diplomacy is attempted. Below deck, the air is damp and warm. Barrels of beer, wine, and rum are stacked like wooden soldiers. The ship sways, making the liquid inside slap against the sides with rhythmic, sloshing thuds. Sailors on break sit on the barrels, talking softly about home families, farms, sweethearts, quiet nights. Alcohol blurs the sharpness of distance, smooths the ache of missing. But rum has another role, one far more practical. You follow the ship's surgeon, who moves through the dim corridor with bandages, herbs, and, of course, a bottle of strong spirit. He uses it to clean wounds, numb pain, calm nerves before stitching. It burns like fire, but saves lives more often than not. Above deck again, the wind picks up. The skies darken. The sea rises like a creature shaking off sleep. A storm. Sailors leap into action, hauling ropes, tightening sails. The captain barks orders with the voice of someone who's weathered 100 storms, and at least half of them sober. Lightning flashes. Thunder splits the sky. Rain crashes down like fists against the deck. You cling to a mast as sailors scramble. Rum-soaked courage meets real danger, and suddenly the bravado becomes quieter, sharper, more focused. Storms don't care how much you drink, but the crew works together, grunting, shouting, pulling, balancing, surviving. When the storm finally passes, their breaths come in shaky unison, like one giant lung exhaling relief. The captain, soaked head to toe, raises a hand. "Bring the rum," he says simply. And they do. Not as celebration, not as indulgence, as gratitude. As the sky clears, turning pale gold with sunrise, cups clink softly across the deck. Not rowdy or reckless, just quiet, relieved, human. A toast to survival. You sit on a coil of rope, sipping rum that tastes like heat and wood and smoke. The ship gently rocks, calmer now. Sailors hum a low tune. Someone snores. Someone sharpens a blade while trying not to fall asleep. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, vast, powerful, indifferent. Yet, aboard this ship, humans have carved out a tiny world of camaraderie, courage, fear, faith, and fermented comfort. As the sun climbs higher and the sails billow once more, you let your eyes close. The warm rum settles through your body like embers. The sea hums its ancient lullaby, and you drift into the rhythm of waves, wood, wind, and a drink that has carried sailors across oceans and back to the warm cradle of sleep. You wake to shouting not the panicked kind, but the frustrated, bureaucratic, fed-up kind that only happens when governments start making rules about people's drinks. The air is thick with the smell of tavern smoke, damp wood, and simmering resentment. When your eyes adjust, you find to yourself standing in the middle of a colonial-era town square. Wooden buildings sag slightly from humidity, horses snort impatiently, and a crowd is forming around a notice board where a man in a powdered wig is nailing up a fresh proclamation. You step closer. The parchment crackles as it stretches under the nails, and in bold, pompous handwriting, you see the phrase that has started more trouble than it ever solved: increased duty on spirits and imported rum. Well, that explains the shouting. A tavern keeper bursts out of his door holding a mug in each hand, yelling something deeply uncomplimentary about politicians. A group of dock workers mutters angrily, already organizing themselves into a discussion about doing something. And you, standing in this rising storm cloud of public irritation, realize you've landed squarely in the era when governments discovered they could control alcohol, and citizens discovered they could push back. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Across the 17th and 18th centuries, European and colonial governments imposed heavy taxes on alcohol, beer, wine, rum, whiskey. These taxes funded wars, expanded empires, and enraged nearly everyone who enjoyed a drink. In America, The whiskey tax famously sparked the Whiskey Rebellion in 1791, one of the first major uprisings against federal authority. Your quirky tidbit arrives when a man beside you squints at the proclamation, then loudly declares he can't read but knows nonsense when I smell it. He then announces a boycott of all spirits until prices go down, but immediately walks back inside the tavern for one last drink before the boycott starts. The crowd applauds his bravery. Historians still argue whether alcohol taxes helped stabilize early economies or caused more chaos than they prevented. Watching this crowd fume, stomp, and throw their hats on the ground dramatically, you're leaning toward chaos. You wander into the tavern, the true heartbeat of colonial life. The air inside is warm, smoky, and alive with tension. Men huddle at wooden tables, whispering about unfair laws. Women behind the counter pour ale with steely control, trying to keep the peace. Barrels line the walls like silent witnesses to centuries of political mischief. The barkeep slams down a mug of rum and declares, "If they tax us more, we'll start making our own." The room erupts in cheers. Someone shouts, "We already do make our own." More cheers. Someone else yells, "My cousin's cousin blew up a barn doing that." A collective wince follows. This is your section's joke. A man leans in and whispers proudly, "It's still drinkable, though." Out in the street, a local magistrate attempts to calm the crowd. He raises his hands and begins explaining the necessity of taxation in maintaining public infrastructure, troop payments, and national security. No one listens. A fishmonger heckles him loudly. Someone bangs a mug on a barrel like a war drum. The atmosphere is crackling, heated, electric. Nearby, a group of farmers gather around a cart filled with corn, barley, apples, anything fermentable. They whisper about turning their harvest into moonshine to avoid taxes. You can practically feel the birth of the underground distilling tradition forming in real time. You follow one farmer home. His barn smells of hay, grain, and stubborn determination. Inside, he reveals a small copper pot, still hidden beneath a blanket. He polishes it with the tenderness of a man buffing a treasured family heirloom. Then he lowers his voice and teaches his friends how to heat mash slowly, how to condense vapor carefully, how to avoid accidentally creating liquid that blinds people. He says this with the seriousness of a surgeon. His friends nod like this is perfectly normal Friday afternoon conversation. Evening settles over the town, lanterns glow, mugs clink, but the tension doesn't fade. Alcohol is no longer just a drink, it's a political symbol, a protest, a rallying cry. You return to the square just as a group of rebels lights a small bonfire. They toss copies of the tax proclamation into the flames. Someone delivers an impassioned speech about freedom, rights, and the injustice of paying more for a beverage that tastes this good. People raise their mugs high, shouting in agreement. Yet beneath the shouting and the rebellion, something quieter pulses. Unity, shared struggle, shared identity. Alcohol becomes the thread, weaving these people together against a common adversary. A drink that once comforted now fuels political fire. A man hands you a wooden cup. "Drink to liberty," he says. You do. The rum burns, but it also warms. Night deepens. The fire crackles. People trade stories of past rebellions, future dreams, rumors of change. Couples lean into one another. Friends clasp shoulders. Children fall asleep near the heat, comforted by the sound of community rising around them. You sit on a crate, watching sparks drift into the dark sky like rebellious fireflies. The crowd chants softly, rhythmically, a lullaby of resistance and hope. And you realize something profound. Alcohol isn't just shaping culture anymore. It's shaping politics, shaping nations, shaping the rules humans are willing or unwilling to obey. You rest your head back, letting the noise soften into a sleepy hum. The fire warms your feet, the mug warms your hands, and slowly, gently, you drift with this restless, determined crowd into the long night of change. You wake to a rhythmic clatter, metal on metal, gears grinding, steam hissing like a giant mechanical serpent waking from a long nap. When you open your eyes, everything around you is moving, not people, machines. Massive, roaring, churning machines lined up inside a huge brick factory that smells like hot grain, smoke, yeast, and ambition. The Industrial Revolution has arrived. You stand on a raised walkway, overlooking a floor buzzing with activity. Workers in soot-smudged aprons haul sacks of barley. Steam-powered mills crush grain with thunderous force. Long metal pipes rattle as boiling liquid is pumped from one vat to another. Everywhere you look, brewing has transformed into something faster, bigger, louder, brewing scaled up to feed cities instead of villages. The roar is so constant, so overwhelming, that your ears ring. Below, enormous copper kettles shine like hammered sunsets. Workers climb ladders to stir the mash with long paddles. Steam rises in shimmering clouds, filling the air with a warm, malty haze. A foreman shouts instructions over the racket, something about temperature, pressure, efficiency. His voice barely carries. You lean against the railing, watching as the automated bottling line clanks into motion. Glass bottles rattle through the machine like disciplined soldiers, washed, filled, capped, labeled. Hundreds per minute, thousands per hour. Brewing has become industry. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the 19th century, mechanized brewing, powered by steam engines, precision thermometers, hydrometers, and refrigeration revolutionized alcohol production. The world saw the rise of commercial breweries, mass distribution, and standardized recipes. Your quirky tidbit arrives courtesy of a young worker struggling to adjust a conveyor belt. It snaps, sending a dozen freshly filled bottles sliding across the floor, each one exploding into perfect, synchronized pops. The worker winces, the foreman groans, and your section's joke lands when someone nearby yells, "Don't worry, those were the experimental ones." They were not experimental. Historians still argue whether industrialization improved alcohol quality or simply made it more consistent. Watching the machines, you suspect both. The craftsmanship is different now, less hands-on, more technical, but the precision, unmatched. You descend the staircase and walk through a corridor where workers rest during breaks. They sit on crates, sipping small portions of the day's brew, evaluating flavor. One man swears modern beer tastes too clean, like it needs more mud. His friend insists the new stuff is the future, waving his cup proudly. You smile. Progress always inspires debate. Moving deeper into the factory, you enter a room filled with experiments. Glass beakers line wooden tables. Scientists in long coats measure yeast strains under early microscopes, jotting down observations with inky pens. They debate wildly, pointing at charts showing fermentation rates and sugar conversions. You recognize one of the diagrams. It's the early work that will inspire Louis Pasteur's discoveries about fermentation and the role of microorganisms. The idea that yeast is alive, truly alive, has shocked the scientific world. And here, you watch it reshape brewing forever. One scientist hands you a small vial of yeast, proudly showing how a single strain can produce consistent flavor, every time. His eyes gleam with the zeal of a man who has replaced guesswork with chemistry. But not everything here is serious science. A group of workers gathers around a machine with pride, unveiling a bizarre new invention, a rotating barrel meant to blend beer with fruit pulp for novel flavors. They crank the handle, it sputters, coughs, and sprays sticky berry foam across the room like a gleeful toddler with a hose. You wipe your face, they cheer. The foreman sighs so deeply it echoes. Welcome to the age of industrial experimentation. As afternoon melts into evening, you step outside the factory. The city grows around you, chimneys puffing into a grey sky, horse-drawn carts rattling over cobblestones, gas lamps flickering to life. Taverns line the streets, but they're different from the old, smoky dens you visited earlier in your journey. These are brighter, busier, filled with factory workers, ending long shifts. Inside one tavern, the bartender proudly pours pints of newly standardized beer. Consistent color, consistent flavor, consistent strength. He explains that breweries now deliver fresh barrels daily thanks to railroads and refrigeration. People marvel at the clean taste, the clarity, the steady supply. But in the corner, 3 old men grumble that beer used to taste like adventure. One insists that modern brewing lost its soul, while sipping his 3rd pint of the night with great enthusiasm. Their complaints soften into laughter. Tradition and progress argue, but they drink together just fine. You find a quiet table and sip the amber ale placed before you. It's crisp, balanced, predictable. The kind of drink made not by chance or magic, but by science and steel. It warms you gently, settling in your chest without chaos or fire. Outside, factory whistles blow. Workers drift home. The city hums softly beneath the glow of gas lamps. You feel the shift fully now. Alcohol isn't just ritual, medicine, celebration. or rebellion anymore. It's business, industry, innovation. You lean back in your chair as the tavern's gentle noise lulls you, clinking glasses, low conversation, boots on wooden floors. There's comfort in consistency, safety and predictability. And yet, just beyond the edges of this new world, you sense more change coming, more conflict, more reinvention. The night deepens around you. The machines fall silent one by one, and in the soft glow of industrial progress, you drift slowly into sleep. You wake to silence, unnatural silence. No factory clatter, no tavern laughter, no clink of bottles or hum of brewing machinery, just the soft creak of wooden floorboards and the distant hiss of wind passing through narrow alleyways. When you sit up, you find yourself in a dimly lit room with boarded-up windows, dust dancing in thin beams of light, and the faint smell of alcohol that someone is trying very, very hard to hide. Welcome to the age of prohibition. You stand and peer out through a crack in the boards. Outside, the streets look almost normal, people in hats rushing to work, horse-drawn wagons carrying crates, a policeman strolling with an air of exaggerated righteousness. But something is off. The world feels tense. Like everyone is waiting for someone else to slip up. You descend a narrow staircase into what appears to be a bakery. The owner greets you with a forced smile, flour smudged across his apron. "We only sell bread," he says, much too quickly. You nod. He nods. Then he taps 4 times on a shelf, lifts a crate of flour, presses a hidden lever, and suddenly a section of the floor creaks open like the mouth of a secret world. He gestures silently for you to follow. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During Prohibition in the early 20th century, especially in the United States, alcohol production, sale, and distribution became illegal. The intention was moral uplift. The result was one of the largest explosions in organized crime, smuggling, secret bars, and creative loopholes in history. Your quirky tidbit emerges the moment you step into the hidden cellar. A man in a suit is stirring a giant bathtub of gin while wearing a perfectly pressed vest, but absolutely no socks. He explains, with the gravitas of a professor, that socks reduce airflow and ruin the flavor. This is your section's joke. He clearly made that up on the spot, but everyone solemnly nods like he's a genius. Historians still argue whether Prohibition was doomed from the start or simply mishandled. Watching this hidden bar hum with excitement while the legal world upstairs pretends everything is dry, you vote doomed from the start. Lights flicker on, the underground room glows gold, tables are filled with sharply dressed men and women, jazz musicians tuning their instruments, flapper girls laughing, bartenders polishing glasses with a speed that suggests panic and practice in equal measure. This is a speakeasy, one of thousands. A pianist starts a lively tune. Conversation swells. The bartender hands you a glass of something that smells suspiciously citrusy, but also slightly like nail polish remover. You take a brave sip. It's awful. But everyone cheers anyway, because the point isn't the drink. The point is drinking something you're not supposed to. You sit at a table where a couple speaks in hushed tones about the latest smuggling routes. "Rum running across the Great Lakes," the man whispers. "Smugglers tie barrels to ropes and drag them behind boats. If the police show up, snip. They sink them." The woman sips her cocktail and smiles. Then they come back later and fish up the barrels. Genius. Another table discusses medicinal whiskey prescriptions which were legally allowed. Doctors wrote tens of thousands of them. Pharmacies made fortunes. Alcohol found a way. You notice a hidden side door where crates are being dragged in, labeled as cough syrup, olive oil, sewing supplies, and one box simply marked "definitely not rum." Subtle. But the era isn't all glamorous secrecy. As the music swells, a siren shrieks above ground. The room freezes. Musicians stop mid-note. The bartender blows out half the lanterns with one gust. Someone yanks the bathtub gin maker behind a curtain. Then the siren fades. Everyone exhales. A woman beside you laughs nervously and downs her entire glass. "Police like to remind us," she says, "that they exist." Later that night, you follow a group leaving the speakeasy. They walk through back alleys, slip into shadowed doorways, and step into a warehouse full of barrels and copper stills. This is the other side of Prohibition. Moonshiners and bootleggers running secret distilleries. Men stir mash in the dark. Women pack jars into crates. Teenagers watch the door, tense but proud. A bootlegger hands you a jar with a grin. "Careful," he says. "This batch is strong enough to make a statue dance." You sip. Your eyebrows consider leaving your face. Yet beneath the law-breaking and chaos, you sense something else: necessity. Families rely on this trade. Communities form around these hidden networks. For better or worse, alcohol has become rebellion, livelihood, identity. By dawn, you stand on a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. Sunrise paints the skyline in pale gold. Down below, speakeasies shutter their doors. Bootleggers vanish into the early mist. Police patrols slow to a tired crawl. You breathe in the cool air. The world is still but buzzing beneath the surface. Prohibition tried to erase alcohol from society. Instead, it changed its shape, pushed it underground, made it dangerous, political, legendary. The sky warms. A new day stretches open, and as you step back into this strange era where laws and desires collide, you feel the story pulling you forward once again. You wake to a glow, a soft, sterile glow that hums with electricity instead of firelight, candlelight, or sunrise. Your eyes adjust slowly, and when they do, you find yourself standing inside a laboratory. Stainless steel counters, glass beakers, refrigerators humming softly, shelves filled with vials, samples, and carefully labeled jars. Computers flicker with graphs that look like constellations trapped behind glass. This is the modern world, the era where humans don't just stumble into fermentation. They analyze it, decode it, engineer it. The air smells faintly of alcohol, but it's clean, crisp, tightly controlled. The scent of intention, not accident. A scientist in a white coat passes you, holding a pipette full of something golden. Another records notes on a touchscreen. A third carefully opens a temperature-controlled cabinet containing yeast strains, each one pure, genetically mapped, and catalogued. You lean closer and read names that sound like a cross between astronomy and fantasy novels. This is where the story of alcohol meets the story of science. A researcher beckons you over to a machine gently vibrating in the corner. She smiles and explains that it analyzes fermentation in real time, measuring sugar levels, alcohol content, and yeast behavior down to microscopic details. You watch numbers shift on the screen like a living heartbeat. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Modern brewing and winemaking rely heavily on microbiology, genetics, and precise chemistry. Yeast is no longer mysterious. We know its species, subspecies, metabolism. We can cultivate strains for flavor, aroma, clarity, efficiency, even for specific regional brews. Your quirky tidbit arrives when another scientist proudly shows you a bottle of beer made from 5,000-year-old yeast found in ancient pottery. He pops the cap, takes a sip, and declares it tastes like history stepped on a raisin. "This is your section's joke," his colleague beside him whispers. "That's because you fermented it wrong." And they launch into a heated, extremely nerdy argument. Historians still argue whether modern alcohol is better, cleaner, or less soulful than ancient forms. Watching these scientists debate fermentation curves with the enthusiasm of poets, you realize something comforting. Humans never stopped caring. They just changed tools. You walk to another part of the lab, where a technician opens a door leading into a sleek tasting room. Its minimalistic white walls, perfect lighting, temperature calibrated to the decimal. On the counter, glasses hold beverages from around the world. Wine from volcanic soil, craft beer fermented with wild yeast, spirits aged in barrels older than you, cocktails infused with botanical extracts engineered for precision. You sip from a glass of modern craft wine. The flavor is complex. Layered notes of fruit, soil, oak, sunlight. Not an accident. Not a mystery. A collaboration between nature and human intention. Nearby, a group discusses alcohol's cultural role today, how it connects people, brings comfort, inspires creativity, or accompanies ritual. But they also talk about harm, moderation, public health, and balance. Something ancient civilizations wrestled with too, just without the graphs. You move to another room where geneticists examine yeast under microscopes. They talk about selective breeding like farmers once talked about grapevines. They modify strains not to increase strength, but to enhance aroma or reduce off flavors. Yeast has become partner, tool, and teacher. You wander past a shelf filled with books, thick volumes on brewing science, chemistry, anthropology. Every civilization you visited is represented, the arc of human history, all woven through alcohol like a golden thread. Then, a researcher hands you something unexpected, a VR headset. You slip it on. Suddenly, You're standing in a digital reconstruction of the places you've traveled. The forest where fermenting fruit first bubbled in a hollow, the ancient honeycomb overflowing with mead, the clay pot fizzing beside a fire, the stone circle glowing at dusk, the early cities humming with beer vats, vineyards stretching toward the sun, trade routes whispering rumors of distillation, monasteries needing science and spirituality, ships braving storms with rum in barrels, colonial squares burning with rebellion, speakeasies humming under the law's nose, factories roaring with progress. The world shifts, scene by scene, until you're back in the lab, no longer a traveler, but someone who has carried the story forward. The researcher lifts the headset gently. Alcohol isn't just a drink, she says softly. It's memory, it's culture, it's humanity studying itself. Outside, modern life hums cars, lights, conversation, laughter, people sipping carefully made drinks in small bars, rooftop gardens, quiet kitchens, people celebrating, mourning, reconnecting, unwinding. The same reasons humans first reached for fermented fruit under a fig tree. You step out onto a balcony overlooking the city. Neon lights glow like stars reflected on glass. Somewhere below, glasses clink with gentle cheer. Wind brushes your face, cool, calming, familiar. The world feels big now. Bigger than ancient fields, bigger than empires, bigger than the sum of all its rituals. Yet your journey makes it feel connected, threaded, continuous. You lean on the railing, letting the night breeze settle your thoughts. Alcohol is no longer mystery, no longer magic. But it is still warm, still human, still part of the story. The lights blur softly. Your breath deepens. The city hums like a lullaby. You're ready to drift. And now, as the world grows quieter around you, let each breath slow gently, like waves folding themselves onto a calm shore. You've wandered across thousands of years tonight, moving through forests, deserts, oceans, temples, workshops, festivals, cellars, and laboratories. Each place with its own warmth, its own laughter, its own soft glow of shared drink and shared humanity. But here, in this moment, nothing asks anything of you. There are no crowds, no machines, no storms, no distant drums or bustling taverns, just the soft hum of night settling like a blanket across your shoulders. Let your muscles loosen, your jaw unclench, your eyelids grow heavy. Imagine the warmth you felt from ancient fires, from clay pots, from lantern-lit feasts. Let that warmth settle into your chest, quiet, steady, safe. You've seen how humans reached for comfort, for connection, for courage, how they shared cups to bridge fear, to celebrate joy, to welcome sleep at the end of long days. And now, it's your turn to rest. Feel the air around you soften. Imagine a gentle hand smoothing the edges of your thoughts, dimming the noise until only calm remains. The night deepens, shadows stretch long and peaceful. You breathe slowly, deeply, letting the weight of time rest behind you. All those centuries fade into a distant hum, soft, harmless, comforting. Let your body sink, let your mind drift. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to change. Just the gentle rhythm of your breathing and the quiet promise of rest. You're safe, you're warm, and you can let go now. Sleep well, traveler. Your journey is complete.